Hello again, gamers. Welcome back for another episode of Grokking Twilight Imperium. I'm the board game captain, and today I'm going to be showing you how to grok the Sardakk Noor. So I want to start off by giving a big thank you to one of my viewers, Silent and Sly, who requested that I cover Sardakk Noor in an episode of Grokking Twilight Imperium. So Silent and Sly, this episode is for you. So to start with, I want to start off by telling you what you get when you pick the Sardakk Noor as your faction. So to start with, you have a starting system that has two planets. It has Quinara and Dreadnought. Now, Quinara has a resource stat of 3, which is quite good, quite decent, meaning that your starting production for your starting space stock will be 5, and an influence of 1, which is not very good. And then Dreadnought just has a resource of 1 and an influence of 0. So overall, this is a very good starting system. You've got a decent amount of production for the planet that you're going to put your space stock on. You have a decent amount of resources at 4. The influence is not so good, but these guys are not really about politics and whatnot, and you can grab more influence to help you with the leadership card later in the game as you conquer planets. But to start with, this is a good amount of production to get those early fleets big and formidable. The first few fleets you build, you will have a fair amount of resources to put behind them. Now, next, I want to talk about your starting fleet. So your starting fleet is 2 carriers, 1 cruiser, 5 ground troops, a PDS, and a space dock. So, of course, you're going to put the space dock and most likely the PDS in Quinara, like I had already said, because that's going to have the much better production value. Now, the 2 carriers with 5 ground troops and, of course, a cruiser to help escort them is really a top-tier colonizing fleet, because with 5 ground troops, you're able to colonize a 3-planet system and a 2-planet system starting on the very first turn without even taking warfare or anything else. Now, if you get warfare, of course, you can colonize 3 systems. This is really a top-tier colonizing fleet and is very good for expanding quickly out into the galaxy. Okay, now next I'd like to talk about the one faction ability that the Sardakk Noor have. It is called Unrelenting, and it is one of the easiest to remember and easiest to use faction abilities in the game. It is simply apply a +1 to the result of each of your units' combat rolls. This works for space combat and ground combat. Every one of your units basically is 1 point better on their combat ratings than just about every other faction's units in the game. They're just better. I mean, so your cruiser, instead of hitting on a 7, hits on 6s. That's great. Your carriers, instead of hitting on 9s, hit on 8s. Your Dreadnoughts, once you build them, instead of hitting on 5s, hit on 4s. This is really, really good. And again, it's a big part of why this is such a great faction to play for new players, because of how easy it is to take advantage of this ability. Now, I do want to draw some specific attention to, with all of these incredibly powerful, starting fleet, starting system, starting, your basic ability on the card, the big downside is your starting technologies are non-existent. You have no starting techs. Almost every faction has at least 1 starting tech, which, whether or not it's a decent starting tech, at least helps you with the prerequisites of future techs. The Sardakk Noor start with no starting technologies, so this is a big Achilles heel for them. There are a lot of technologies that can work really well for them. We're going to go into that in a minute, but they've got nothing towards the prerequisites of higher level technology. So generally speaking, you will be behind when it comes to techs versus most other factions. Now, next, I would like to talk to you about the Agent, Commander, Hero, and Mechs, because they are quite good for the Sardakk Noor. So we're going to start with the Agent, who, of course, you get at the beginning of the game and have immediately usable. The Agent for the Sardakk Noor is Tarot. Now, Tarot, it says, at the end of a player's tactical action, you may exhaust this card. If you do, that player may place 2 infantry from their reinforcements on a planet they have control in the active system. So this happens at the end of the tactical action, which means during the tactical action you can gain control of planets in this system, and then you can immediately get 2 free ground troops placed on one of these new planets you have. This is a great way to get lots of free ground troops and not have the ground troops take up a lot of valuable space in the production capacity of your space docks. So especially that first space dock that has a fairly decent production capacity, you can focus completely on building ships and then move over to the systems where you've gotten your free ground troops and pick up the troops as you go to keep spreading out and colonizing or invading enemy planets. This is really awesome. Really good ability. One quick note I want to draw attention to is, unlike a lot of other agents, this is not an action unto itself. This happens at the end of a tactical action, which is both good and bad. One, you can't waste a turn when you're trying to delay by you just using the ability, but at the same time you get to use it in addition to doing a tactical action. So if you're trying to play quickly, it's a positive. If you're trying to slow things down and play slowly and let your opponents do some things first, then it's kind of a detriment because you can't use it to waste a turn. Next, I want to talk about the commander. Now, the commander is Gahom Sekkus. Now, his ability is unlocked when you control 5 planets in non-home systems. This is one of the unlock requirements that has the capability to be unlocked in round 1. If you get a 3-planet system in your starting hand of space tiles, and you get a 2-planet system in your starting hand, you can place those both adjacent to your home system, and on the very first round, if you take both of those, you can unlock this commander ability in the very first round of play. Now, the ability, once he's unlocked, is during the commit ground forces step, you can commit up to 1 ground force from each planet in the active system and each planet in adjacent systems that do not contain one of your command tokens. So this is huge. This allows you to move ground forces around without carriers. So you can have huge invasion fleets, or you can use this, of course, to get some of the objectives, like some of the secret objectives that require you to have a lot of ground forces on a certain planet. There's multiple ways to use this, but my favorite way is there's a sneaky way to use this where you can invade planets without having to commit spaceships to a system. You can activate a system, not move any ships there, but then use this ability to throw some ground troops from adjacent systems in there and onto a planet, and either take out 1 or 2 ground troops that were left to defend it, or if it was left undefended, just take it on a whim. This can be a really useful ability to sneakily steal planets to help you get certain objectives, or to weaken the power base of whoever might be winning the game if you are not the player winning the game. Yeah, this is a really powerful commander ability. I like it a lot. Next, we have the hero, Cheval Harbinger. Now, he, of course, is unlocked in the same way that all heroes are unlocked, which is once you have scored 3 objectives. So, once he's unlocked, he becomes Teklar Conditioning Brood Swarm. After you move ships into the active system, you may skip directly to the Commit Ground Forces step. If you do, after you commit ground forces to land on planets, purge this card and return each of your ships in the active system to your reinforcements. So this is an ability that can potentially be game winning when you really need to take Mechatol Rex. So the idea here is you throw some carriers in that you don't mind losing full with ground troops. You play the hero ability, you skip right to the commit ground forces, you just land all the ground forces there. You then do the ability from your commander and get even more ground forces there. And even though one of your opponents may control space in Mechatol Rex, you just took Mechatol Rex from them with a swarm of ground troops, and you actually control Mechatol Rex. This can be an amazing way to foil someone who is about to win the game, and really just take Mechatol Rex out from under them, even if they've committed a huge fleet to defending it. Finally, over here, I'm going to talk about the mech. Now, the mech for the Sardakk Noir is the Valkyrie Exoskeleton. After this unit uses sustained damage ability during ground combat, it produces 1 hit against your opponent's ground forces on this planet. So now, let's not forget that, generally speaking, this mech is normal. Otherwise, it's a cost 2, combat 6, sustained damage. But remember, just like all other units of the Sardakk Noir, it is better than most other units because it has a +1 to its combat. So its combat goes from a 6 to a 5. So already it's a better mech. And then if you use the sustained damage, you get a free extra hit on your opponent's forces. having one or two of these to back up your ground troops is going to be really key in taking some well-defended planets. It is a very quality mech. Now, next I'd like to talk to you about the flagship of the Sardakk Noir. So the flagship is the Samoran Noir. Now, the Samoran Noir is an 8-cost, 6 combat with 2 attacks. Now, keep in mind that with the +1 to hit, that really becomes a 5 combat, which means it hits as well as 2 normal Dreadnoughts for other factions. It has 1 move and capacity of 3. It has sustained damage like all flagships do, but then it has its extra special ability is apply a +1 to the result of each of your other ships' combat rolls in this system. So this becomes an amazing ship to go along with, say, a couple of Dreadnoughts. You have this ship and 2 Dreadnoughts. The Dreadnoughts normally hit on 5s or better, except that with your faction ability, now they're hitting on 4s or better. And then if they are accompanying your flagship, they're now hitting on 3s or better, which is nuts. So this flagship with 2 Dreadnoughts means you have an attack from each Dreadnought hitting on 3s or better, and you have 2 attacks hitting on 5s or better from this flagship. This is a very deadly fleet that you can get without even unlocking any extra technology. Like most factions, to get this level of deadliness, would have to unlock a War Sun. You don't. You can get this at the start of the game. This is really, really cool, and this flagship should never be alone. It should be with groups of ships. If you can increase your fleet supply, you should even have it with more. You can even throw some more smaller ships in there, which again are going to get even better, because a cruiser, for instance, which normally would hit on a 7, hits on a 6 for you because your faction ability, and with your flagship hits on a 5, which means a cruiser with your flagship will hit as powerfully as a Dreadnought for another faction, which is amazing. This is a really good ship. Next, I want to talk about the faction-specific unit that appears on the card, which is their Dreadnought. So now we already talked about how the flagship can make your Dreadnoughts even better. Well, I want to talk about how their Dreadnoughts themselves are even better, and why it is you're going to want to build all your Dreadnoughts and get them all out there, because the Dreadnoughts for the Sardakk Noir are a contender for possibly the crown of the best Dreadnoughts in the game. They're their only faction-specific unit, other than, of course, the flagship and the mech. Now, they are called the Exo Trireme, Exo Trireme 1 for the one that starts on the card, and the Exo Trireme 1 has a cost of 4, combat of 5, move of 1, capacity of 1, sustained damage. So far, it sounds very similar to a normal Dreadnought, but here's where it gets really awesome. They have a bombardment of 4 times 2, meaning these guys hit incredibly powerful when bombarding planets, way better than normal Dreadnoughts. Of course, don't forget that also in normal combat, even though it says combat of 5, you got that ability that means they're hitting on 4s. These are phenomenally good Dreadnoughts, and they get even better when you get the unit upgrade for them to turn them into the Exo Trireme 2. So let's talk about the faction-specific text, so we can talk about the Exo Trireme 2 as well as the Valkyrie Particle Weave. So now the faction-specific text, they require 2 and 3 other texts respectively, and there's not any crossover between them. So it will be difficult to get both of these out during a single game without getting tons of planets that have technology specialties. So if you do draw planets with technology specialties, try to put them close to your homeworld, or put them a line between you and Mechatol Rex, so you are most likely going to be the player to take them, because you are going to need technology specialties to get both of these out. You're going to need a bunch of them. So the first one I want to talk about is the Valkyrie Particle Weave. It is a red tech, and it requires 2 red techs, or of course technology specialties. So it says, after making combat rolls during a round of ground combat, if your opponent produced 1 or more hits, you produce 1 additional hit. So this can be absolutely amazing, and it can chain with the Valkyrie Exoskeleton. So you have the Valkyrie Exoskeleton and a couple of ground forces invading a planet. Your opponent hits you for a hit, you take a damage on the Valkyrie Exoskeleton, which causes an extra hit, and then because they did a hit to you, and you had the Valkyrie Particle Weave out, you cause even another extra hit, which means as long as they cause 1 hit, you're doing 2 extra damage to them above what you rolled. This can be really deadly. Very good for invading planets, definitely, or protecting planets for that matter. Now, the other faction-specific tech, of course, is going to be the upgrade to their one faction-specific unit, which is the Exo Trireme 1. It is the Exo Trireme 2. Now, it requires 2 blue and 1 yellow tech to get, or, of course, technology specialties, which is really what I'm going to be recommending you go for if you get any in your starting hand, is try to get those technology specialties under your control so you can use them. So it has a cost of 4, combat of 5, move of 2, capacity of 1, sustained damage. It still has that bombardment of 4 times 2. All of that is really awesome. And then it says this unit cannot be destroyed by direct hit action cards. That right alone is just phenomenal because I have lost so many ships with sustained damage to direct hit action cards. After a round of space combat, you may destroy this unit to destroy up to 2 ships in this system. Now, because it says it that way, you get to destroy those 2 ships. That means you get to pick. And that is important. So you have the first round of ground combat, you do your damage. You're going to be doing damage with your Exo Trireme 2s because they're hitting on 4s or better, which is fantastic. Then you take one of the damage on it to absorb it. It can't be destroyed by a direct hit card, so you know it's safe. And then at the end of the round, if your opponent still has a ton of powerful ships there, like for instance, their flagship, War Suns, or Dreadnoughts themselves, you can sacrifice one of your Exo Trireme 2s to wipe out 2 enemy ships. So you can be like, yeah, your flagship and that War Sun, gone. That's amazing. That's a fair trade, too, if I've ever heard one. Even if they've already taken a damage, because you're probably taking a damage on your Exo Trireme 2, that's fine. It's worth it to sacrifice it to take out a War Sun or a flagship. Or just one of those 2, along with another Dreadnought. It would be totally worth it to sacrifice one to do it. Okay, next I want to talk about what technologies I recommend to you to try to get some of these prerequisites. Again, I do want to emphasize that I've got a ton of technologies to recommend, and there's no way you're going to get all of these in a single game. It's just not going to happen. I do recommend skipping as many of these as possible and going for the technology specialties instead. There are ones of these where I'm going to say these are really good, but you could skip them if you can get a technology specialty. And there's some of these where I'm going to say these are really important or really important under certain circumstances. So to start with, let's talk about, I've got a couple of blues and a yellow tech for if you cannot get any technology specialties for blue and yellow to be able to get your Exo Trireme 2, because of how awesome the Exo Trireme 2 is. You're probably going to want to try to get the prerequisites if you can. So to start, I'm going to start with the yellow tech, and this is a easy one, a no-brainer, Starling Tools, because Starling Tools is awesome for everyone. Starling Tools, when one or more of your units use production, reduce the combined cost of the produced units by 1. Getting to get a free destroyer or a free pair of fighters or a free pair of ground troops that you don't have to pay any resources for, or just if you're buying bigger ships, getting a discount of 1 every time you use production. Starling Tools is one of the best starting techs in the game. I'm a big fan of Starling Tools, so it's a no-brainer for me that would be the yellow I would recommend. But if you get a yellow technology specialty, you can skip Starling Tools because it's not as important as some of the other techs I'm going to recommend. Now, for the blue techs, for the starting one, I'm going to recommend Anti-Mass Deflectors. Now, the reason is Anti-Mass Deflectors says your ships can move into and through asteroid fields. That's fine, that's good, but it's not the real reason I'm recommending it. When other players' units use space cannon against you, apply a -1 to the result of each die. This is a very combat-oriented faction. You are going to be attacking people. You're going to be getting hit with space cannons if they have put them on their border. Being able to make those space cannons a bit less deadly is a very positive thing, especially against certain factions, depending on who you wind up having to attack. This could be very valuable. But again, this is not a must-have. If you can get a blue technology specialty, you can skip it. The other one I want to recommend is one of the best blue techs in the game, in my opinion, Gravity Drive. After you activate a system, apply a +1 to the move value of your ships during this tactical action. So getting to move one of your ships 1 space faster to help to move, to intercept, and to attack, and to sneak in and attack enemies is always really good. Again, though, this is yet another one where if you're able to get 2 blue technology specialties, you could totally avoid both of these blue. Now, there's a bunch of red I want to recommend, and of course you need 2 red to get the Valkyrie Particle Weave, and of course red also is very combat-oriented, so most of the techs I'm going to recommend are going to be red. There are some of these that you could totally skip if you have gotten some specialties, but all of these are good for the Sardakk Noir. Now, to start with, both of the basic red techs are very good for the Sardakk Noir, which is going to put a little bit of a tough decision on you. I think it's going to be very dependent on what the game board looks like and what opponents you're facing to decide which one of these you might skip if you can skip one of them, you could possibly skip both of them if you get a red technology specialty and just move on to the higher requirement red techs. But let's go into them. So the first one is plasma scoring. When one or more of your units use bombardment or space cannon, one of those units may roll one additional die. So we already talked about that you have the best bombarding dreadnoughts around, or at least a contender for the best bombarding dreadnoughts. They're really good, and getting an extra shot is awesome. So this would be really, really good. Now, the other one is AI development algorithm. When you research a unit upgrade technology, you may exhaust this card to ignore any one prerequisite. When one or more of your units use production, you may exhaust this card to reduce the combined cost of the produced units by the number of unit upgrade technologies that you own. Now, one of your faction-specific techs is a unit upgrade technology, and there are lots of other unit upgrade technologies that you may want to get. This is one of the few that I may say that really you shouldn't avoid. This is going to be very important and very useful. Getting to ignore a prerequisite when getting unit upgrade techs is going to help you to get some more of the unit upgrade techs out. I think between the two, if it came down to it, I would probably ignore the plasma scoring to get AI development algorithm if I had to only pick one. The next tech I want to talk about is the self-assembly routines, which is after one or more of your units use production, you may exhaust this card to place one mech from your reinforcements on a planet you control in that system. After one of your mechs is destroyed, gain one trade good. Now, this is one that you could totally skip if you get enough of the prerequisites. It's one of the ones I would actually recommend skipping first if you're able to get. I would rather get either of the two basic ones than this one, but getting out free mechs is always good, and this would work well with the Sardakk Noir, especially with how good their mechs are. So if you have the ability to get lots of techs, if you manage to get a lot of money and keep getting the technology and getting to play two techs at a time, it could be one of the ones that you might get out. Next, we have Geranium Armor. Geranium Armor says during each combat round, after you assign hits to your units, repair one of your damaged units that did not use sustained damage during this round. Again, not a must-have, but could work very well with the Sardakk Noir. And finally, we have the Assault Cannon, the biggest red tech, which is at the start of space combat in a system that contains 3 or more of your non-fighter ships. Your opponent must destroy one of his non-fighter ships. Now, most of these you can skip, except that they are all awesome, and any of these you could get. So it's a tough decision with the Sardakk Noir. I do recommend all of these techs, but you're not going to get all of them. So it's going to be a tough, picking and choosing. I would say personally, in the case of most of these, except for the self-assembly routines, because of how important that is for being able to get discounts on your unit upgrades, most of the rest of these you could skip if you got the prerequisites instead from technology specialties. Now, there's one green tech I do want to recommend. I think it's very important for the Sardakk Noir, and even though I went with all these other techs to talk about first, this is one that I don't think you should skip, and it is Psychoarchaeology. You can use technology specialties on planets you control without exhausting them, even if those planets are exhausted. During the action phase, you can exhaust planets you control that have a technology specialty to gain one trade good. Now, if you manage to get at least a few planets with technology specialties in your starting hand, and you put them out in places where you're going to be most likely the person to get them, this might be the first tech you actually get. Because this one is going to be so important if you have a bunch of technology specialties for being able to skip some of the lower level techs that I have recommended, because most of them are skippable, being able to skip and go right up that tech tree and get the right stuff to then be able to get your faction-specific technologies. Okay, so we've come to the part of the video where I'm going to tell you how I would recommend using the various strategy cards when you're playing the Sardakk Noir. So to start with, big ones you're going to want to try to get early if you can are Warfare and Technology. So again, you start with no technologies. You're going to want to try to work your way up those tech trees as quickly as possible. If you're able to get technology on the first or second round, it's a good one to go for. But at the same time, Warfare is a really good one to go for because you are a top tier colonizer, and leaning hardcore into that can be really good. Getting lots of systems really quickly can help you get your commander unlocked, which has a really great ability. Either one of these are good for either the first or second round. After that, later in the game, there will be occasions where you're going to want to do construction to get more space docks out, and of course, do Imperial to try to search for more secret objectives as well as scoring public objectives. These are important, and occasionally leadership to get yourself some more tokens. Generally speaking, diplomacy is only going to be something you're going to choose when you really want to stop someone from attacking you in the rear if you've moved a lot of your fleets towards one side of your area. And politics is something that you're probably not going to do a whole lot of unless you're looking to try to grab a bunch of extra action cards. But that's how I recommend it. Definitely very, very heavy on trying to get some warfare to lean into their strengths or some technology to mitigate their weaknesses for the Sardakk Noir. Those are going to be the throughout the entirety of the game, the most important strategy cards that you're going to lean towards, and then occasionally the others when you need them. Leadership when you need to replenish your tokens, construction when you need to get some more space docks, and Imperial when you need to get some more secret objectives. So what secret objectives work well with the Sardakk Noir? Now, there are actually a ton that work well with the Sardakk Noir because they are such a blunt force weapon. There are many that just really lean into their abilities. So first we have Unveiled Flagship. Win a space combat in a system that contains your flagship. You cannot score this objective if your flagship is destroyed in the combat. Now, this is obviously really good because their flagship is obviously really good. And once you have it out with an escort of a couple of Dreadnoughts, yeah, you're going to be winning combats with it. No problem. Destroy their greatest ship. Destroy another player's War Sun or flagship. We talked about the fact that once you get your Exo Trireme 2s out, you're going to be able to easily destroy War Suns and flagships with its ability. Yeah, this is going to be really awesome and really, really achievable, possibly by mid-game. Next, we have Gather a Mighty Fleet. Have 5 Dreadnoughts on the game board. We already talked about how awesome their Dreadnoughts are and how you're going to want to have tons of them. Yeah, that'll be easy to achieve. Make an example of their world. Use bombardment to destroy the last of a player's ground forces on a planet. Again, these guys have fantastic bombardment with their Dreadnoughts. You're going to have a ton of Dreadnoughts out as quickly as possible. Yeah, this is definitely going to be achievable. Next, we have Spark a Rebellion. Win a combat against a player who has the most victory points. If it's not you, you're going to be attacking them. Whoever has the most victory points. And you know what? Very few other factions can stand toe-to-toe with a decently prepared fleet from the Sardakk Noir because of their +1 to all their combat rolls. It just makes them incredibly powerful at combat. Next, we have Horde Raw Materials. Control planets that have a combined resource value of at least 12. You start with a combined resource value of 4. You are a third of the way there. It will not be that hard to get up to that 12. Next, we have Stake Your Claim. Control a planet in a system that contains a planet controlled by another player. Now, I already talked about that with the commander ability for the Sardakk Noir. It is very possible to have this happen. I would say that these guys are probably second only to the Extra Kingdom in getting this particular secret objective to work, but they do have a way to do it, and yeah, it's not that difficult. And finally, Occupy the Fringe. Have 9 or more ground forces on a planet that does not contain one of your space docks. So again, thanks to your commander ability, you can and your agent ability to get lots of free ground forces. As you spread out, you can throw ground forces all over the place. And then once you have them surrounding a region, you can just activate in the middle of the region and have a bunch of them move in to have a ton of ground forces on that planet. You get 9 of them on that planet, and that will count for getting that secret objective. It is very achievable with the Sardakk Noir. So there you have it. Now, the Sardakk Noir, again, are one of the easiest and most straightforward factions to use. They're all about just building up their military might and taking planets by force. Now, you don't want to attack everyone surrounding you. If you do, you're going to paint a big target on your back. So be careful. If you see someone is winning, gun for them. Make alliances with someone who's doing even worse than you because they're less of a threat to you. Hopefully they won't stab you in the back. And if they do, you have the fleets to make them pay for it so you can come back and seek revenge. Play smart. Pick your targets wisely. Don't make enemies of everyone at the table, but when you make an enemy, drive them into submission. Bomb them back to the Stone Age. Conquer Mechatol Rex. Take it right out from under their noses. And hopefully win the game of Twilight Imperium. And there you have it. That is how you play the Sardakk Noir. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, especially comments on anything I might have missed with the Sardakk Noir, feel free to comment down below. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grokking Twilight Imperium and you'd like to see me do more like it, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And if you'd like to have any requests for who I should cover next in my series of Grokking Twilight Imperium, feel free to comment that down below. And until next time, game on. Oh, I was just about to start recording. You're like, no, you cannot record. You must play with the puppy. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, what is happening? Oh, what are you doing? You're like pulling me across the floor here. You yawn so large, I could put my head in your mouth like the old lion tamer acts. You want to give it a try? Yawn again. I'll put my head in your mouth. You're so silly. Okay. Would you go play with your toys so I can do my filming? What do you say? How about it? How about it? Huh? You go play with your toys, okay? Oh. Hi. How you doing? Okay. I know. I'm recording, and then that's when you want the attention. You were just like laying down, doing nothing until I started recording. And then it's like, oh no, you're recording, so now you must give me all the attention. Go play with your toys a little bit. Look, your dinosaur is right over there. Play with your dinosaur. I'll play with you afterwards, okay?